Here we
Good. Finally.
boom. Thank you, Stephanie, for pointing that out to our attention, for especially for all of our friends who aren't live with us. We've got this recorded. Hopefully I'll find last week's recording and get that uploaded. Yeah, so I'm just doing a little overview of our test. Here's some questions from a previous semester. We looked at this first one here about impeachment, which one of these guys narrowly escaped impeachment. So like things you should know going into the test. What is impeachment? Who almost got impeached? Like if you are just befuddled by those terms and you feel anxiety about them, hit Satori. You got to read. You got to be watching some of those YouTube videos because those are some basic ones that are important for our course there. So, which of the following terms is not associated with Reconstruction and freed slaves? So Jim Crow, the KKK, the Harlem Renaissance, the Freedmen's Bureau, or sharecropping?
I have to say C.
Yeah, C, right? The Harlem Renaissance. Very good. Which is in the 1920s. We haven't gotten there. You might not even know what it is, but that might actually maybe alert you like, I don't know what that is. But you don't want to be racist and be like, well, Harlem, so there it's with slaves or black people. Like,
Correct.
It's meant to be a little tricky. That's what I mean about like, I'm not really interested in making sure you retain tons of information. I want to make sure you understand the terms and things that you're looking at. So you might not be able to recall Jim Crow and black codes, that those are two different things. But if I had both of them up there, you know, if I swapped out Freedmen's Bureau and had Jim Crow up there, or black codes as well, my computer, you would know like, well, those ones are Reconstruction. We definitely read about those. There's a big giant section in Satori about them. We talked about them a lot, you know. So again, this is not meant to be like about information retention, and it's not gonna like I try to write these intentionally so they'll be hard questions to just Google, but easier questions if you're really familiar with the notes, the class notes, and maybe even you've written your own notes to try to keep track of things. You can access that information. You can look it up, because that's when, like, you know, outside of history class, if you've got questions, you're going to have to go look them up. But where to start usually is what's overwhelming to people. Like, what is that? We usually are just like, oh my God, I don't even know where to start. And how many of us have, we might have experienced this on either end, where you're like, dude, I have Googled for an answer for this question, not about history, about anything, like 20 times. I can't find anything on the internet. And then your friend or your mom or somebody comes by and they're like, well, try this. And they Google like a different phrase or just a handful of right keywords. And you get like literally the exact result you were looking for. And you're like, how come that didn't show up for me? It's because we didn't even know how to ask the right questions. So like learning how to ask the right question is, you know, that's part of being like a better learner in life. And for the test terms and questions, learning how to like, what is the question asking? And therefore, like, what do I need to try to answer or ask, or what information do I need to check on or double check or look up on or verify before I answer? Because it can't be Googling all 5 of those terms. That's going to take you 10 minutes on 50, you know, on a 60-minute test with 30 questions. And it's like, you won't have time to do that. So to the right here is a different type of question. Place the following events in order. Now, this was an in-person test. So this would be relatively easy to look up on Google. You'd still have to look up all 5 of those and get the dates and then order them. But a little bit of logic and remembering just a handful of key things, you'll answer that in 10 seconds, right? If you remember that the Transcontinental Railroad is like right at the beginning of our course, right? It's 1869. We're not even out of the 1860s. That's probably going to be A. That's super early. That's definitely before people flew. Definitely before World War I. What's that?
Oh, sorry. No, I have a question.
Yeah.
Just in general, you might have mentioned this before, but what format are we taking the test on? Some like 3 times already, so I don't know if I missed the answer to this question. But where are we taking the test, or what's happening?
Yeah. The test is next week, right?
So originally we were going to have the test like today. And then a few weeks ago, I told you, no, it won't be that Wednesday. It'll be the following one on the 15th. Which, depending on how we do tonight, maybe we'll stick with the 15th. Maybe we'll push it out a few days and make it on the weekend. Like I'll just make it open all day Saturday for everybody. So depending on how we do today and getting through material, I'm almost positive I'm going to do it on Canvas, because my problem is that I always am trying new things out, but it bites me in the ass all the time. Like it always creates more work than I'm prepared for. And I've never done a test on OneNote, like in OneNote. So as much as I'd like to, I'll just go ahead and say definitively right now, we'll stay on Canvas. So it'll be on Canvas, and the format will look something like this. It'll be multi-choice, true or false questions, which are usually harder than multi-choice actually. And then probably some matching sections. Like I might just have you match up the author with the work, or a politician with a certain event, or, an inventor with his invention, something like that. And then maybe like this question that you guys see on the screen here, I might just have you order some events, like place them in order. So as with all things, whether they're multiple choice questions, ordering things, matching, start just by using your powers of deduction, your logic, right? Like start there. You can usually work out in a lot of multiple choice tests what is not the answer, even if you don't know the answer. You can usually like zone out a couple of them and start narrowing down your options, and it'll help you just focus in on, this is what the question is asking. It can only be this answer or this answer. Now I've got to decide which, between these two, and then go look stuff up, or just sit for a second and like try to recall, which will be faster than looking stuff up, and then answer. And 9 times out of 10, go with your first gut instinct, right? You guys remember a lot more than you actually remember. Like our brains subconsciously store way more than you can, have on recall.
Isn't all of us is supposed to use 10% of their brain for knowledge? I think that's what I remember from quantum psychology.
I have heard that, and I've heard all kinds of stuff about like the capacity of our brain and how we use it. And I had a really interesting conversation with somebody today on, I told you guys about this new app I'm on, Stereo, right? Did I tell you about this? It's a brand new social media app, and I'm actually working for them. So I'm on there 10 hours a week as like a paid content creator. It's like, it's not even 2 weeks old yet, the app. But you just get on there and have conversations. So it's like following our page, Kimberly and Jose. You can literally just like hop on there and talk to people, and I can get on and talk. I'm going to hang up though, because I don't want to talk with anybody. Anyways, I was on a conversation with somebody on there. We're talking about ADD, ADHD, and how there's a lot of people in the community now that are moving to put those on the autism spectrum. And so I brought it, it brought us up to the subject of like talking about autism, Asperger's. Like, is this a abnormality that we as autistic people think differently than neurotypical people? Or, as we're seeing more and more and more people diagnosed with autism, ADD, ADHD, all of those things, perhaps this is just a biological change that we're making in our brains and in our, it's all neurological, for living in a world where we need to use more percentage of it. We need to like process more information than ever before. We need to multitask and process multiple streams of information at once. People 100 years ago didn't have to do that. So, yeah, just a
Or it
thought.
could be in the food.
It could totally be in the food. It's
With
like,
the
who knows?
dyes and stuff.
Who knows what's, I think over the next, few decades, we'll probably get some answers to that. We used to think like all kinds of things that were biological were unknowable, unfathomable. And then, genetics and DNA and finding the double helix of DNA and all these things. It's like, well, we can not only understand this and explain it now, we can clone it. Like, okay, wow, we learned a lot more about the body than we thought we were going to over the 20th century. Like if you asked people in 1900 what they thought people would know about the human body in the year 2000, there's no way they couldn't even guess at the stuff we found out and figured out. And so, yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. It'll be a thing to watch. I'd keep an eye on that, I think.
What is the website called? Or the new app?
It's stereo, just like
Stereo.
what you'd play on. So I'm going to get on later tonight at like 10. I'm going to get on for an hour, and then I'm going to be on for 6 hours tomorrow. I'm doing like a stretch. So from like noon until 6. And I might be on more than that. I'll probably be on over the weekend and stuff. So if you're on there, like find me, we can chat, or you can just hang out and listen, leave comments if I'm chatting with somebody. Or just chat with somebody else. This is a pretty fun app, actually. It's like, this is good. I think the world needs an app like this. We need more conversation. We need less like trolling people in the comment sections of Facebook and whatnot. All right. Well, let's see here. We've gone for an hour on some bookkeeping stuff. The test, OneNote. We're getting up to speed. If you are one of the people that were listening tonight, or you're hearing this, tomorrow or the next day from the online class and we're not able to be with us, this is the moment. Get up to speed. Put in the hours. There's not like the opportunity is going to pass soon. So do the time now. And if you're just struggling and like, man, I cannot get this, you can email me. We can try to find a time. I'm getting my schedule a little bit more balanced out, so I'll add this into our syllabus, but I'm going to do Monday, Wednesday for my office hours from 4 to 5. So I'll be on Zoom for that hour on Monday as well. But of course, like if those don't work, we'll find something out. We'll figure out a time to talk and chat. But also don't be afraid to like private chat somebody in Zoom right now, or somebody in the class, or somebody you heard talking that you're like, you're smart, you know what you're doing, and say, hey, could you help me with this? Can you help me figure this out? You seem like you know what's up with notes. Help me figure out how to write better notes. It's
Noah the second.
What's that?
I said Noah the second.
Yeah, Noah the second. Our class economics major, which I just love. I was telling my wife, I'm like, I think I've had maybe like, I don't know, a handful of maybe 2 or 3 economics majors in like 9 years of teaching history. So,
Really?
yeah, there's
crazy.
not a lot of you guys. Not a lot, but I love it. I mean, it's such a huge part of history. Economics is. So it's good for us to engage in. It's the same way though, I feel, and this is a great thing about teaching at community college, about having people from different generations or different ages, eras, as well as veterans. At community college, I get a lot more veteran students than you probably would at like an Ivy League school. Not to say that veterans don't get in, they do, but we just have a lot of them here. We got a giant military base. So there's lots of veterans, lots of people using the GI Bill, which is so fantastic because we have to talk about wars in modern history and modern American history. It's a huge part of it, but I'm not a veteran. I've got 0 experience in that at all. And I can only explain the military from a distance. So firsthand knowledge it's always great. It's always great too, having folks from other countries in here. I had one student, she was older, she's like maybe in her 50s, and she grew up in Moscow during during the Cold War, and like left Russia afterwards. Her point of view and experience was very helpful when talking about the Cold War. So yeah.
Sir, economics.
Do we have any more? Do we have any more like bookkeeping questions or anything like that before hopping into like material? Does anybody want to throw anything out there before we change gears?
Yeah, I had one. I was confused. We can like put as much as we possibly can, with facts and everything in OneNote, right? Because like the bare minimum was like what, 15 or 20?
Yeah, like over the semester. So you want to do like 3-4 contributions a week on average, right? And of course, if you miss a
Okay.
week, make it up the following week or in a couple weeks to follow. And here, I'm glad you said something because somebody pointed this out to me earlier. There are some students who have simply copied the material that's in Satori and pasted it into OneNote, which is not helpful to anybody. Like you could do that. You could copy what's in Satori, paste it into OneNote, and then delete tons of stuff and edit it and chop it up until there's some bullet point lines in there and it's real brief information. That's helpful to us as a class, but just copying what we already all have on the internet and putting it in there is not, and you will not get credit for it. And if you keep doing that, I'll just probably kick you out of the class because it's like having a class troll at that point. It feels like, you're just crowding the comment section in here. So I know some of you guys were doing that, not with those intentions at all. So I'm just saying from this point forward, make them original contributions. And if you're finding stuff that you want to put lots of information on there, particularly if it's not covered well on Satori or in the notes yet, you leave an item in there for the notes. But if it's all kinds of information, interesting stuff, fun facts, all that, maybe just put it into Satori. Now I have not been able to get it hooked up so they're editable yet. So if that is the case, always just throw it to me in an email and I'll add it in there because, well, I know like sometimes you just find stuff and you're like, well, this is cool. I don't want to like just lose this information, or this is the rest of the class should know about this. So this is good stuff to know. And we want to share it, but it's not necessarily like helpful for our whole class. Or if you start finding items like that and you're like, oh, this is great. There's lots of info, but it doesn't necessarily like need to go into study notes for a test. That might be stuff you want to just keep while you begin to start thinking about your project, your timeline project. And so in brief, and I'm actually intentionally going to wait until after our first test to even really talk about the project because I don't want you guys to get overwhelmed or even be thinking about that yet. But in terms of like reading, writing, putting stuff in OneNote, collecting stuff, that's already happening for everybody. So I just want to tell you the things that you're finding like, oh, that's interesting. Like, keep them, start a collection of them, whether they're links or articles or you're copying and pasting information. And even if they're about a few different subjects, right? Because they might actually wind up really interlocking together to make a good project. So I want you all, every single person in the class, to find a passionate subject that you're like, I love this. It doesn't even feel like work when I'm looking up stuff on this subject, right? Like, I could watch YouTube videos on this thing all day. I could read a magazine about this for hours. Even writing up stuff about it doesn't even feel like work. Everybody has that. And if you don't, it's your life is sad for you and you have no passions, but we'll find some for you because we all have it. And I want you guys to have that for your project because then not only is the project going to be much easier for you, it's so much more enjoyable for me to read when you're writing about stuff that you actually care about instead of like this president died at this time. And but it's like, well, if you are bored, you can't even imagine how bored your teachers are. Like, it's not riveting writing even. So it's just going to be boring. It might be technically right, but it's just kind of sucks the life out of you. So I love doing these projects because, and kind of like our notes, kind of like our material, it takes a little bit to wrap our minds around, to really get adjusted to. It's a different type of project. But once you get over that hurdle, it's like, well, I'd way rather do this than write a research paper. I'd way rather do this than have to give a presentation or, whatever. So we will all get there. I will help you guys get there. If you're like that, I don't even know what you're talking about. That sounds impossible. All of history is boring. We'll get there. I can help you get there. If you've already got a few little hamsters spinning on the wheel, that's great. That's great. That's the beginnings of some
Hey,
stuff.
sir.
Yeah.
When you say group timeline project, what exactly do you mean by that? Like,
Yeah.
So, and I'll show you. So a little bit like our Satori timelines. And I'll actually open up some student ones as well here. Let me switch the
Okay,
scene.
hold on. I got a question. I got a question really quick.
Hmm.
I got a question because you said that we cannot put like all the information from Satori to OneNote or something. You can't do that.
Sorry, what's that?
Okay, so we can't put the Satori information from Satori to OneNote or something.
No, you can totally do that. And
Like,
if
I
you're
remember you said that we
reading it
can.
and putting in like critical information, like in
Yeah.
note style,
Yeah, I am doing that.
fashion.
I just want to be sure because I have been doing that and I've been reading through them and want to see if they're like really important or just.
That's
like,
perfect. You can
okay.
totally do that. I want you to
I
do
just
that.
want to be sure.
I don't
Like,
want you to just literally like copy and paste what's in the paragraph and then like copy it and then paste it into the notes. I could do that. Like we don't need that. It's more like, hey, okay, that's an item. Instead of just copying and pasting this paragraph, copying it and pasting it, which is literally zero work. I mean, it's like a second of work. You have to read it, understand it, and then go to OneNote and go, okay, now I'm going to put in the like critical bits of information that we should all know about this to study for a test. So
Yeah,
that's
I'm-
the difference.
because I am doing that and I am reading through which one's like important or one's just facts. Like it's just like some are just like facts that we don't have to know and some we have to know. I'm doing that. I'm kind of doing that.
Yeah, and that's the rub, as they say. Like sorting through those is challenging, and that's I'm happy to help you guys sort that out at any turn. That's what I want to do on Wednesdays. Of course, we can do that over email. But like by the end of the semester, everybody will be better at doing that than they were at the beginning, hopefully including me. Cause like I'm always sorting in my life, like what's important, what is just media hype, what is just a stupid news story, what's trying to manipulate me and get my attention, what's propaganda, like what's the agenda behind it? Like I'm asking those questions all over the place in life. And we all should be, right? We all should be. Most of us probably already are. But we should all be doing that. And so that is the hard part though. That is there's no study guide for that. There's no magic wand to be able to make that happen or formula. It's literally just practice of critical thinking. So this is our OneNote from last semester that I'm in with for one of our 108 groups. And over here, how we wound up doing this one, we'll probably do something similar, was we kind of brainstormed live on Zoom, and I created different categories for some of the themes and stuff people were talking about. And then we kind of worked on those in here, like work on a focus on it, like a thesis statement, if you will. And people went in and kind of like signed themselves up in here. So they kind of selected for groups that they were interested in. And then content library, where do I have this? I'm gonna have to I have to find where it is. I'll just open Satori in the meantime. I do have a list of student. Oh, actually, my list might be in Satori. So, stories. If I come over here, so I've got History 108, which is our collection of Satoris, which I am definitely in the process of updating. If you guys haven't, please go back and look at chapters 1 and 2. If you only did that in the first week and have moved forward, I cleaned them up a lot and added some text and some explanation and context on some stuff. Not tons. There's not like tons to read through or anything like that. It just might actually help give you a little bit more focus. And so then this is a list of student examples. They're all pretty much from this last year. Let me go this way. Intersection of press and politics, a history of investigative journalism. So they look through the country at these different kind of like landmark investigative journalistic moments, but then have to interweave them with like the rest of these like events that are going on around them, like the world wars and the invention of the airplane and all those things. So it can't just be a themed topic on like, you know, the history of dance, right? Like it has to be dance and culture. It has to be, why is this important for America? So we find kind of some of the things that often get overlooked. You know, we don't spend a lot of time talking about mental health or photography, music, dance, law enforcement necessarily, but you can pick that as like, this is the lens I'm going to look at this 150-year period of American history through. And so as a student in this course, you've already looked through it with like just like no lenses, no glasses, just full vision. And there's so much stuff. There's a lot of stuff. It's a lot to take in, but you've tried to take it all in. Now you're going to go back through and re-examine all of that history, kind of with this in mind or in front of you, and see how that changes what you're looking at. So when you're paying a lot of attention to, you know, investigative journalism versus propaganda, all of a sudden World War I looks a little bit different. All of a sudden, you know, the rise of the television might not be the best celebration of all of humanity, right? Like, you know, of all of our inventions. You'll notice certain other things. You know, if you're doing that with mental health issues and you're looking at spikes and things or identifications of new mental health diseases, and you see like, oh geez, like there was an opiate crisis right after World War, like 10 years after World War II. Those things are probably not unrelated, right? How do I relate those? How does the Cold War and like anxiety about nuclear Armageddon and like all these things, how do those factor into what's going on in mental health in the 50s? And then you get to the 60s. And then when you get up to the 80s, like real political things happening, like the kind of religious right that elects Reagan supports him to defund all the mental health hospitals and just like totally screw over all of our veterans and literally dump thousands, hundreds of thousands of mentally ill people onto the street with nothing. Like, oh, those things are definitely related. Why don't we talk about those more? And I'll tell you what, you guys, my wife was literally yelling at me yesterday. She's like, every time you start new stuff, like since you've been teaching every year, you were like, I'm starting a new textbook. And I'd ask you not to, and you'd be like, this is the last one. And then you just started your own. And I'm like, okay, I know, I'm sorry, but I really promise, like, this is what I'm doing now. I'm not trying to do another textbook. She's like, no, I want you to do another textbook. It's simpler. They're easier. You've got more time when you do them. But oh my God, I have never found a single American history textbook for college students that even acknowledges that we closed all our mental health hospitals and kicked everybody, you know, out on the street. So I'm like, I'm not really interested in teaching a history that doesn't teach those things. That's like, we are living in that. The Antelope Valley, we have thousands and thousands of homeless people up here. They make up 3% of our population of the Antelope
Yeah, and
Valley.
a lot of them got dumped too.
Yeah.
even from other states, like,
Mm.
you know, because California, though, our homeless population has risen in the whole state because of, you know, the weather here. That's not because, but it was one of the reasons because of it's ideal to live up here. And then the ones in LA are using the Antelope Valley as dumping grounds.
Hmm.
And you know, it's just a real big problem, and people want to think like it's not the community's problem, but it is.
Oh my gosh, it
It
so
really
is.
is.
And like
Professor,
some people are trying to address that, like RX Paris, but I feel like he's kind of trying to address it in the Ronald Reagan fashion of like, well, let's just bulldoze over them and move them somewhere else because
Right.
he is sick of them, and I think rightfully so, getting dumped at downtown Lancaster because that's where the Metrolinx ends.
Right. And they
Oh.
are, and they're actually hospitals or jails even, they'll just give them a one-way ticket to the Antelope Valley. And Paris, I remember a couple years ago, he was offering a one-way ticket to get the hell up out of the Antelope Valley. Like,
Yeah.
just go back to where you come from, but no one wants them. And it's really sad because,
Yeah,
even though no
when you
one
get out
wants-
of Twin
yeah.
Towers Jail, City Jail in downtown LA,
Mhm.
they always have the wristband on, and they're given a Metrolink ticket
Mhm.
for the AV line. You just walk across the street, go down to Union Station, hop on it, sleep for a couple hours, and you're in Lancaster, where everything's cheaper than it is in downtown LA. So why not? You know?
But we don't have the resources, and that's another problem. That's why it's like getting flooded. We do not have the resources to take care of these people.
Yeah.
We can't even take care of our own people. I mean,
Right.
people who are like you said, you know, like even just a regular mom and dad or teenagers. It's a serious, you know, mental health thing that's going on within our society, and a lot of people, you know, just need the help.
Mm.
And
Can
go ahead.
Can I add to this from a medical perspective?
Hmm.
I am a registered nurse, and I have worked for many years amongst the homeless population, treating them through Grace Resources, doing a lot for when we had our homeless shelter open here in the Antelope Valley. I was doing a lot of the testing for them to be able to be admitted into the homeless shelters so that they could have places to sleep at night. At any rate, in reality, yes, mental illness is an issue, but I think a bigger issue with the homeless population is drug addiction. From my perspective, there is actually a good portion that are, you know, veterans that are dealing with mental health, or just people who in general are dealing with mental health, but more so it's drug addiction. And the problem is that we, you know, it's funny because we as the Antelope Valley, not only are we a dumping ground, but we're also a forgotten stepchild of LA County.
Mhm.
So several years ago, the voters voted to put in tens of millions of dollars in funding to help with the homeless population. And it was supposed to be all of LA County. And I was involved in the homeless count. So that every so often they go and they do homeless counts in order to give money to proportionate cities that have a large amount of homeless. And for LA County, Lancaster and Palmdale, the Antelope Valley, per capita had one of the largest populations in LA County. Do you know how much funds we got from that voting from LA County? Zero. They sent zero money up to the Antelope Valley and kept it all for downtown Los Angeles area. We got nothing.
No,
So
not surprising. Not surprising though.
Yes, and so we have to deal with the drug addiction issue. We have to deal with the mental health issue, and definitely, there are mental health hospitals out there. I know Antelope Valley Hospital has a unit. I've been on the unit with myself, but we need more, definitely. But
Well, we need something well, they know they're getting ready to open, I think this fall. It's supposed to be this month in 2 weeks. The High Desert, it's going to be the whole mental health emergency campus where they're
Mhm.
going to be on call or available 24/7 for adolescents, children, and adults, which is much needed on Avenue I.
Oh yeah, yeah, I saw that.
Yes, but it won't really start opening doors until I think it said like maybe October, November. And so that should bring some help, some relief. But like she said, if you have a drug addiction
Yeah,
and you don't take your
Yeah, we have to
medication,
deal
or
with
if
the
you don't
drug
even have
addiction.
access to get your medication, it that also there's a lot of people don't even have access. They don't have medical, insurance, medical insurance to even get their medication.
right. And the difference, you know, those of you that are like chemists or but studying pharmaceuticals can fill us in a little bit here. But the difference between like methylphenidate, which I'm on as you know, because I have ADD, I'm autistic, I've just got issues. I got all kinds of stuff. But that's chemically, it's not super far from methamphetamine. Like they're
Mhm.
different, but they're scratching the same itch, kind of in different ways. I have health insurance, but like for people that don't and are trying to function in life, a lot of drug addicts turn to drugs because they can't get the kind of relief or focus or whatever that they could through, you know, like legal means that middle class America has that they don't. And so you know, but of course they're more addictive. There's problems with them. They're not
Correct.
regulated. You can get dirty stuff. You can get bad drugs.
Well, and then also the legal stuff produces a whole bunch of side effects, which causes a whole nother
Yep.
swell of problems. And but it's okay because it's legal. It's pharmaceutically pushed.
Yeah.
And so that makes it all right. But if you try to just score a little bit of weed on the street, you're going to be a criminal and pushed to jail. And that's
You guys,
another whole
I can't tell
story.
you the amount of people, I mean, amazing people, smart people, good-hearted people that I met in prison that were in there on drug charges.
Mhm.
There was one guy in there on drug charges who had been in since the late 70s. There were quite a few people in there, some of them my age, who had never been on the internet ever in their lives.
Mhm.
Which, tragedy aside about our prison industrial complex, was fascinating. I'm like, you're like a time capsule of a human. Like all the rest of humans don't know how to think the way you do. Like we used to, but we can't anymore. Like your brain is unique. There's not a lot of people left who've never been on the internet. That's a weird thing to think about. So two things. One, some of you might know this, but most of you will be surprised to know that the meth came from the government. We created it. America, Germany, Britain, France, all the major countries were producing it during World War II. In Germany, it was called Pervitin. And it was like distributed to soldiers. Like it made them super soldiers. They stayed up longer. They didn't need to eat as much food. They were hyper aggressive, super focused, like kind of just rabid about things. And you just keep giving them more. They just keep getting more and more jacked. Well, they get discharged from the army and they've gotten addicted to drugs. What are you going to do? Oh, now they've made Pervitin illegal, right? Like you get discharged from the Navy because we were giving it to people too. And they dishonorably discharge you because they find out you're gay. So they got you addicted to drugs and then like socially and professionally exclude you for being gay and drop you in, well, one of the two major ports for America, the Pacific and Eastern, either in San Francisco or, the East Harbor, like in New York, like not far from Greenwich Village. So like those are like two historically, like they're kind of hubs of the LGBTQ community. it's not because the drinking water there made people gay. Like they wound
Right.
up there concentrated in pockets for a reason. And then drugs are related to those communities as well as other communities for some of those specific reasons. So I think, like we're talking about homelessness and we've got these problems of mental health, drugs, local politics, all of those things are huge factors, but the underlying factor there, as in most all things that we're going to look at, is economics. It is money. It is wealth, massive wealth equality. It is, a system of cruelty to people. So this, Martin Luther King Jr. came to this conclusion before he was assassinated. Gandhi came to this conclusion before he was assassinated. Malcolm X came to this conclusion that yes, there are civil rights injustices that need to happen, that need to be rectified. They're going on. There is certain legislation that needs to be enacted that's specific to Black Americans or women or whatever group we're talking about. But the underlying issue here is money. It's economics, and it's how we treat one another. And I totally agree with them. So it might feel like a dry subject sometimes, but it's what's driving all of us in here. It's what's if you guys could all choose today, like, would you like to be on Zoom from your house at AVC here with me, or would you rather be on Zoom with some like internationally recognized history professor from your apartment in Cambridge while you go to Harvard? It's not just all intellectually why we're not all at Harvard. Like there's a lot of economic reasons why, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so like where we are, all of us, I mean, even the people at Harvard, this is just true for everybody, is based out of kind of our economic reality and our economic system. And it's when the country starts, when we're formed in 1776, kind of earliest, is when Adam Smith writes Wealth of Nations. And it's a pretty great book at the time because it does what, most people don't do with economics. Breaks things down into pretty simple terms, easy to understand concepts, and like kind of interesting, captivating language. So actually lots of people read it. It was pretty short too, actually.
You said Adam Smith?
Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. It's like the Bible of capitalism. And it's written and like widely read the year we proclaim our independence. So it's very much like linked to Americanism, like what it means to be an American. The same way democracy is for us. But then, maybe middle of the 19th century, like the 1850s, is when 1848 is when Karl Marx and Frederick Engel will write the Communist Manifesto, which is like the Bible of communism. And it kind of lays out, it's actually not like this tract on how bad capitalism is. Marx actually believed you had to have capitalism in order for socialism or communism to work. Like he said, well, this is just the natural next step in capitalism. This is the humane progression of it. And so that was written in the middle of the 1800s to deal with that economy, which was an industrial revolution. It was, people are now workers, not farmers. People are moving into cities. But that was 170 years ago. I mean, that was a really long time ago. Not capitalism, the idea of communism, which was supposed to be an update to capitalism. Like, they're so old. Like, we actually don't have an economic theory for globalization. We don't really, if we did, it would be like Bitcoin, and there'd be all kinds of different rules, and it would be a different thing. We have global capitalism, but that's just a globally enhanced version of a, very out of date system for how we think about money and economics and wealth and trade in the world. I'm not saying that it's bad. Like, I'm not saying like everything that ever happened under capitalism is wrong and evil. We live in a very like hyped up age these days. So like if you say one thing about something, you're the devil and you hate it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying like that seems like not really addressing the problems we have. Because when did we start putting people in penitentiaries, in prisons, and punishing their minds, and like putting them in prison for life, which just seems absurdly cruel.
Sir,
Yeah. When did we start doing that? When the Industrial Revolution happens, when
Mhm.
all of society changes. So like if we're, it's obvious, like we change all these other things in our life as these big kind of ideas, industrialization and whatnot, the internet, they change how we live. We just really haven't done that with our economics very much. Yeah, Noah.
you said you're running a history textbook, but it was going to emphasize or at least discuss mental health. You said that. I think that reminds me of what a postmodern scholar, Kit Jenkins, writes. Is how he kind of talks a little like Michel Foucault, but only instead of talking about knowledge and power, he talks about how in many ways, like he gave an example. I think an example I read online was that if I hear about history of like marijuana, for example, from a history professor, that's credible. But if I heard about the history of marijuana from like a bartender, that's supposedly not credible. So now do you see like how there's a contextual aspect to it, and how
Yeah.
the reason why we consider a historian to be valid is because he's checked by his peers, because he undergoes a certain rigorous training and so forth. And I think that the mentally ill people, I think that they are covered to some degree in textbooks, but not nearly to the same extent as other subjects.
Right.
But it's just because they're mentally ill. I mean, good luck trying to. I mean,
Yeah.
like you don't go down the street to homeless people and ask them, can you write this history textbook, or can you contribute this piece of scholarship?
Right. But like in the future, we can. You know what I mean? Like we can.
Correct.
It's not hard to like. If you're putting together a digital textbook, right, to like even in just your own community, like go out and interview some homeless people about it. Like that's all of a sudden we can do that. And to that level, because I agree with your point, and in the age of social media that we're in, it is totally infuriating as a historian to like have to try to. I don't go around arguing with people, but sometimes friends just post dumbass things. And I'm like, that's not true. That is categorically wrong about the Boston Tea Party. This is some right-wing propaganda thing it's just wrong about history. I don't even have to talk about the politics of it. Like what it's saying is false. And like people are having a hard time with the fact that my opinion on that should matter more than theirs. Like I have been told off by friends because I am like, yeah, I am saying what I'm saying about this is more valid than you. I've read a lot more about this stuff than you have. And, like textbooks, I haven't read all the textbooks like at all. And there's new ones being written all the time. I've definitely read more than the average person. And I've probably read more than, somebody who's been teaching for 9 years. I might maybe have read as many as somebody who's been teaching for like 15 or 20 years. I just plowed through them. I read a lot and they were just kind of all, all the same, like 5-6 things every chapter. And whether it was stuff like mental health, because, okay, if I'm being honest and not speaking hyperbolically, there probably was a textbook that mentioned mental health hospitals under like a 1-paragraph blurb about deregulation, but like didn't talk about that issue by itself and really didn't talk about deregulation. It was like, well, we have to mention this now. It's such a big, like, it's kind of just a thing about the 80s, but it's the same way a lot of textbooks are like, we have to talk about the Holocaust. So here's 2 paragraphs. Like, oh, no. It doesn't matter what history you're studying. American history, world history, Jewish history, the history of humanity, the history of science. You have to talk about the Holocaust. Like if it's covering that, right? If you're talking about pre-industrial Southeast Asian history, you probably don't have to talk about the Holocaust. But if it's in your setting, you have to talk about it because it makes everybody have big questions about stuff. And I can't remember if I was talking to you guys about this last week or at some point on the Stereo app. I was definitely talking to somebody about this, but about Holocaust denial. Are you guys familiar with this? Like the denying it, that the Holocaust is a thing?
Yeah.
I mean, there's people to this day is still denying like that was slavery and that there's black codes and
Right.
people were hung, and so it's just like they don't. Yeah, I've heard plenty of people deny like that didn't even happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. So this is the thing. I knew this, I knew people did that back when I was in high school. I went to, I grew up out here. There was tons of sharps and skinheads and, people that believed all kinds of crazy stuff. But I didn't realize it was quite as widespread as it is until I came across a movie. And
I said there were victims.
I'm just going to put a caveat on this before I tell you what it is, because it's very it's totally disturbing, but it's like a highly manipulative piece of propaganda. It's a quote documentary called "The Greatest Story Never Told." Has anybody heard about this?
I've heard about it. I don't think I've watched it. I have heard about that.
You have to go looking for it if you want to watch it. It's not on any streaming stations. You have to BitTorrent it or find it on some Ukrainian website or something like that. It's like underground now because it's it's longer than that. I think it's like 5 or 6 hours long. It's really long, and it's basically like a revision of World War II, showing that the Holocaust was all fake, that Hitler was misinterpreted, that the Allies had this conspiracy, and they go on to it's all painted in with pictures from World War II and footage and quotes and dates and all this stuff. And the quality's not really, maybe 20 years ago it would have been fine. It's not good today. Not anywhere near the one where that crazy video that was going around about COVID being the conspiracy. I can't remember what it was. You know what I'm talking about. It was
I saw it on Facebook.
Super high production,
Yeah.
but it's just hogwash. It's none of this is not right. And it's the same thing. They used footage, dramatic footage that actually wasn't what they're talking about. It was more stock footage or taken from somewhere else. Dramatic music, out of context quotes from people, and they paint this very compelling story. But I'm not joking. It opens up with a picture of Adolf Hitler, and then in swells the music, the Enchanted Sea, Enchanted Melody, one of those songs, but it's an instrumental version of it. And it's then this kind of Star Wars text starts scrolling over the screen, and it's why Hitler would have been the best boyfriend ever. It was just a love story, a love poem to Hitler. It was oh no. So I'm because I was doing research for what I was writing about on World War II. And I was all over the place. I was downloading anything I could. I was watching all kinds of stuff. And I'm what is happening? So, I just lock in and I watch the whole thing. And if I hadn't have just done weeks of research on World War II, I probably would have been duped by quite a few things in there. And there were some other things that I had to look up, because they take parts of history that are left out, of our history textbooks, or a Western, British, English textbook, and then interweave it with the out of context things, and then just some straight out lies. And voila, you've got a totally different a picture of World War II that fits in with conspiracies, which fits in with you thinking all the world's a giant conspiracy, because that's impossible to think about somebody killing 6 million people. Kind of the way it's impossible to think about the two towers, getting hit by airplanes and falling. Yeah, that wasn't even really happening. That's studio. That's Marvel. That's too crazy to have happened. So our minds want to go to simpler explanations, something we can try to wrap our head around. And if you don't want to even, you don't, so here's the deal. You don't even have to be racist. You don't even have to be a white supremacist. You don't even have to be white. Like, you just have to want to not believe that the Holocaust is real, which I don't know about you, but I fit that category, right? Like, I don't want to believe that's real. I would much rather believe that these kinds of other explanations could be true and that it's just, people being people. No, this is true because the facts support it, because the evidence is there, because we're getting our information not from like, like one source, not from like one kind of homemade movie, which by the way is sponsored by Wagner's granddaughter, I think. Wagner, the composer, like Flight of the Valkyries. Dun, 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 dun. Hitler was a huge fan. His granddaughter is paying to get this produced. Like, it's being made by some rich people with an agenda. We get our information from way more places than that. And when we hear stuff like that, our impulse will begin to be, that doesn't sound right. And we want to dive in and find out why. But I've had students, since I've taken the time now to go like into depth on the Holocaust, really talk about statistics, really talk about not just the how could that logistically be possible, but also like, man, what does that mean for us? Like, because that's what we all have to wonder after like learning about that stuff. Like, it brings up some existential stuff. And I think most teachers probably don't want to go there. But like, because I've done that, I have had multiple students come to me at the end of semesters and say like, thank you very much for doing that. I actually thought the Holocaust was fake before your class. Like, I feel horrible. I used to make jokes about it. I totally thought it wasn't real. Like, normal looking people, they do not have like swastikas tattooed on them. Some of them are nice little girls. Like, this is widespread everywhere because we are having a hard time distinguishing fact from fiction, or like learning how to like ration out what truth is and what might be, manipulated. So even in our material on Satori, that's why that exercise is even in there. Like, I might even throw in one or two just crazy fake history news stories in there to see if you guys catch it, because it's like we need that. We're living in the world. We got to sharpen those skills. We got to work on those things. Otherwise we are susceptible to be just duped by people. Well, that was a very long train of thought there. I appreciate you guys hanging in for it. It's an important one because this is like the whole point of why we study history, why we study facts, why we work through this stuff, because it really does matter. It really is important for our lives. So let's take a break. Let's